Welcome to another episode of the Hockey Hub. You're looking at Marco Sturm, the 30th head coach of the Boston Bruins in Bruins history. Just been announced, I would say, less than an hour ago. Already in his rightful place with a nice smile. Bruins, good with the video team. Adam, you know them. They're great. They already got everything down. They got the video of him turning around, the smile, the Bees logo right beside his name. So this is breaking news for us. This is a hockey podcast, and we have lots of hockey to talk about, lots of fresh hockey to talk about because of this news. Adam, you missed our morning meeting because you had to jump on. Boston has entered the chat to talk about this, so you're already an expert.
Gotta love breaking news, right? All hands on deck. Be ready for anything. But to your point about the social team for the Bruins, we'll give them a shout out because before the reveal, they had a little teaser video. So that's how I started my day, looking at the teaser video and the nameplate and the head coach and all that stuff. It's like, all right, it's go time.
They're good.
And then a short time later, the announcement. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, those NDAs that they sign must be really strong because they know what's going on, and then they're ready to press go when the news hits. We've got a couple of guests on our show today to talk about what this means for the Boston Bruins and get some players' perspective on coaching and how it's changed in the NHL. Why don't we bring in our first guest, Brian Boyle. Was on our show a couple of times. I don't know, how many times were you on, Nesson? A handful of times this past season, one of the worst seasons for the Bruins in recent history. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I only had to do one Bruins game, though, so it wasn't as bad. It was mostly college with Adam, but yeah, I got to do one game. It was the heartbreaker in Carolina, I believe, and yeah, it wasn't
the broken stick.
Wasn't ideal, yeah. Zadorov's broken stick. Don't know why I was trying to make that pass anyway, but yeah. Got on, and big news for Bruins.
Big news for the Bruins. No, exactly. This is something that we're going to have you on in our pre-show meeting to talk about the prospects and who could be a good coach, and is it going to be Misha Donskov, and is that an opportunity? That's all out the window. We know what the answer is, which is nice. We can be clear now. We can focus in one direction. So I'll start, and of course, Adam and I will go back and forth. But just as a former player, does it matter to you? Did it matter to you when your head coach not only was a former NHL player, but one that played for the team he's coaching? Do you think this is going to matter to the guys in the room?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. I never got to have that experience, but I had an assistant coach who had played for LA in Harpo and Mark Hardy, and he had a lot of pride in it. So I know that is meaningful for sure. But, I had John Tortorella, who obviously played, but not at the NHL level. I had John Cooper, who was one of my best coaches, and Torts. I had Mike Sullivan as an assistant in New York. So former players, they're all over the place. It's great. Who played for that team? I didn't have that experience. So, I think it certainly cannot be a bad thing. And his name has been brought up numerous times in other coaching searches. He's wanted to take that jump. Obviously, he's dove headfirst into coaching since he's finished playing. He was a very, very good player. And I think his acumen for coaching will be high because he's managed American League players now in the new league with younger players. This Bruins franchise, where it's going, is going to have to get younger. And what he brings is a sort of a middle six player. Like at times in Marco Sturm's career, he was a top six, top line player. And at times he was, a third line or two. So he's played different spots, different roles in the lineup. He can relate to a number of different guys and how he fills out his staff. I don't know, was that announced yet, how he's filled out his staff? How he does that's going to be hugely important.
What are your thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Soph.
No, just to answer his question, it hasn't been announced, but we know that Joe Sacco is likely going to New York. I think that's all but confirmed. So Joe Sacco will no longer be on the staff, but I don't think anything else has been announced. Adam, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. First of all, Boyle, thanks for waking up, dude, because I know you're in Edmonton right now, and I know that game was wild and went late into the night, and so I know you're a little blurry-eyed right now. So we appreciate you coming on, my man.
Yeah, listen. I went straight to bed after the game. An hour and a half post game, Mountain Time. I'm here for you guys.
Yeah, man, you're the best, and we only bring you on for the big days, right? So we got a new head coach, so we got to talk about that. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, the thing with the Bruins that sort of stands out among the league, their counterparts in the league, other teams, is the culture, right? Everybody talks, when they talk about the Bruins, they talk about the culture. How important is that to address right out of the gate if you're Marco Sturm?
Well, obviously he has to set the standard, and that is going to be a big challenge for him. And just because there are going to be people, fans, players, whatever it is, guys that have been in the organization for more than 2 years who know what the culture was prior, with, Z leaving and then Bergeron retiring and now having traded Marchand, and these guys that built that culture over a decade plus. I used to witness watching this team play. Hated going into the Garden to play because it was never easy. No matter what they had or how they finished that year, it was certainly a tougher night of sleep before a game against Boston than it was most nights, because maybe it was because I was from the area, but it's not an easy thing to get. I think every franchise, there's 32 of them, want it. Certainly 32 don't have anywhere near what Boston had. And it's still pretty fresh in Bruins fans' minds. So, yeah, it starts with the head coach in terms of what the players, but it's on Don Sweeney and Cam Neely to draft and develop and pick players and bring players into the organization that check a few boxes with their character and their commitment levels and their will to win. You need humble players. You need an understanding. So for Marco Sturm, there has to be a hard line drawn right at day one, and then that has to be re-emphasized every single day, especially in his first year. So there's going to be hard moments for him in his first year where you'd have to lose ice time, or players might have to sit out a game because they're not doing things the right way. That's never going to be easy. You want to be liked as a coach, I'm sure, but you have to be respected. So it's, step one is certainly being respected and establishing what you want. That comes down to communication. That comes down to certainly fairness. But when you do those things, if the player holds up their end of the bargain, that culture sort of comes organically. And then finding the right guy, finding the right person, I think, in free agency that can sort of galvanize that group and relay that coach's message by how that player reacts, how that player goes about every single day.
You mentioned his resume, and something that we've been talking about, obviously, assistant coach experience, the AHL experience. I want to touch on Team Germany, only because when we were kind of anticipating who it might be, it's never really come up when we talk about Marco Sturm. And I'm just wondering, so we know that Team Germany 10 years ago, it's like this is not a team you would have feared in hockey. Germany has done a good job with growing the game of hockey. One of their players yesterday scoring the overtime winner, obviously. So we've seen a lot of growth there. But what he was able to do in the Pyeongchang Olympics and how he's been part of that development, I want to zero in on that because it's kind of, has helped put Germany on the map. And so you can kind of liken it to a team that's maybe in a retool, which is what the Boston Bruins are calling it, or a rebuild, where you're not maybe expected to have much success, but you have to, dig deep, whether that's a cliche or not, and find that and kind of grow the game within your organization. And he helped do that on a different scale and a different stage for Team Germany. Do you think that experience helps at all, or is that just so different from the NHL, the Olympic time?
Well, it's different from the NHL, but if you're Marco Sturm, that's a position where, you're the head, you're coaching your country. It's for Europeans especially, like their national team means more to a lot of these guys than even their National Hockey League team. Like playing for their country in Europe, I got to witness it in 2021 at the Worlds. Actually, incidentally, we played Germany in the bronze medal game, and after the game, it was during COVID. They come into our hotel. We're all staying in the same hotel. They came into our little room that we had because they were out front. We had some beers, we had some food lined up for us. We invited them in and just sort of picked their brain. And they, like 4 or 5 hours after the game, they're still devastated. They lost the bronze medal game to the Americans, and we won like 6-2. It was They played hard. They had some good players, but watching how they played that game and throughout the whole tournament, they gave us a tougher game earlier in the tournament. I was impressed. And I think of that, and for your question, like, that's a high pressure situation for Marco Sturm, because for him, he's leading that national team, and he has so much pride in his national team and his country. So you put a lot of pressure on yourself, and it's impressive when you can do well in that situation. Now he's coaching his former team. It's his first NHL gig. Expectations on the outside might not be as high, just like they probably weren't as high for Germany. But he's going to put a lot of pressure on himself, and he rose to the occasion then. He did really well in Ontario, and he's earned this right. So it should be, if you want to look at it that way, Sophia, that's a positive for Bruins fans and people that are looking into this organization. Like, first-time head coach in the National League, what do we expect from him? Well, you're going to expect a guy who's going to put a lot of pressure on himself to do well, and he's shown that he can in the past.
You know, that leads me to my next question. You mentioned first-time head coach in the National Hockey League. By the way, Brian Boyle, a longtime NHLer, local guy, who's been on our NSN broadcasts, some college broadcasts, a little bit of Bruins as well. You know, you've seen coaches with NHL experience, longtime NHL coaches hired this offseason, Mike Sullivan, who we mentioned earlier. But you got a guy like Marco Sturm, you know, with no NHL head coaching experience. We see some other teams do that as well. A couple of years ago, right? Spencer Carberry in Washington. Do you see that more in this day and age that you used to back in the day? You know, guys without NHL head coaching experiences getting opportunity at the NHL level?
Yeah, well, people look at John Cooper and they look at Spencer Carberry and you know, the recency bias, and see how well, you know, they've been able to have, you know, they've had success fairly early, and then, you know, obviously Cooper sustained it. He's probably an outlier, but I think a lot of organizations, if they're in need of a head coach, would choose that way originally, because what does it say? What does it look like to the general manager if they pick somebody who's a relatively unknown in head coaching circles or to the fan base, and that guy becomes John Cooper, right? Like, that looks good for everybody. And, you know, Dan Muse was just hired in Pittsburgh, and he played hockey at Stonehill. He's from Massachusetts. He kind of worked his way up, starting at Williams College. Then he went to Yale for a while. He coached the Chicago Steel. He coached the national team. He's been an assistant coach for 5 years, parts of 5 years in the NHL with Nashville and New York. Now he's the head guy in Pitt. I think it's sort of a philosophy from these GMs. If you have your guy, if Mike Sullivan gets let go and you're the Rangers and that's your guy and you want that guy, which I think was the right move because he's a brilliant coach, you go out and get him. If a certain guy fits, yeah, he's maybe going to have to interview a couple more times, or there's a bit of a prove it stage, obviously, because it's their first gig. But if it works, I mean, it's lower risk, higher reward, I think. With Marco Sturm, I think it's probably a little less of that, just because, you know, how long he played, how good he was, how his career was, and that he's been coaching for a while. You gotta give him credit and understand that this guy probably knows quite a bit about the game and how to teach it as well.
What kind of coaches, you mentioned John Cooper, but one of the conversations around Marco Sturm, and I want to give a story maybe a little later on in the show about his communication style that I've heard from other people. But one of the things that sticks out is that apparently he communicates very well, doesn't leave you guessing, knows how to talk to you when you're doing well versus when you're not. And those are examples that have been used around him. And just wanted to ask you, what stood out to you about coaches you liked, and is the communication and being able to have those difficult conversations as opposed to, you know, leave players guessing why they're benched or why whatever's happening? How important is that in this day and age, especially?
I mean, I think that's coaching. Understand where I stand. Tell me what to do. We don't have to be buddies. You don't have to talk to me much otherwise. I think there needs to be respect there, but just tell me what you want me to do, what my role is, and if it's going poorly, let me know. You don't really necessarily even have to tell me if it's going well, because I'll know by how often you put me on the ice. That is coming from a 40-year-old who came up in 2007. So that may or may not have changed a little bit, and I'm sure it's different for a lot of guys. If you're if you're Phil Kessel, I'm sure you don't need to hear anything, right? Or if certain players don't necessarily need to hear anything. But from the players I talk to, knowing where you stand and telling you the truth, what you expect from the player is paramount. That is number 1 and 2 and 3 probably, because I'm the one that has to go out and perform. I'm the one that has to go out and play. If I know exactly what you want me to do, I can work towards that, not just in this game, but in practice and what I'm watching in video. It can help me think about, all right, what does coach want from me while I'm watching my own shifts, between games or whatever I'm doing? What does coach want from me when, I'm in practice, or if I have to prepare for 3 games the next 4 nights? Those are just kind of the non-negotiables you have to have as an individual. You have to think about that as an individual. And how does that kind of tie in with what my line mates are doing? How are we going to approach this game? All those things come into play, and it's a lot easier to find that answer when the coach is giving you the same message over and over, or communicating with you, hey, we need more here. I need you to be more physical. We need better on the penalty kill, whatever it may be.
Adam, if you don't mind, I just want to jump in again for a quick follow-up. So everything you're saying sounds like the most obvious thing in the world. Like you said, 1, 2, and 3, top 3 things is communication. What the heck? Like, what is it and what was it about old school style coaching that didn't happen? Because I've heard from so many guys around the league, like you said, in your age range and when you played, that, guys would just leave you guessing, or there was the silent treatment, or is it intimidation? Is it a power thing? Like, how has that not always been the most important thing? And why is it starting now or recently? Why are we hearing about more of that recently? Do you have any answer for why that just wasn't always the case?
Well, sometimes you think, so old school, think about old school and think about free agency was at 31. You had your team, and that was pretty much your team. Guys didn't get paid as much. Guys didn't leave as much. And when you had your team, that was pretty much your team. And you had your coach who talked to, and I wasn't, especially when I was a younger player, that was when things were a little bit more old school. Your coach might have talked to your captain a lot, and he delegated to his assistants a lot. But there was a separation between head coach and players, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. But when it comes to meetings and stuff, like I had one meeting, I won't say who it was, but I was up and down. I played like 6 or 7 minutes in a game, and we had 15 minutes of video straight, and it was all me of the same game. I only played 6 or 7 minutes in, and I'm just getting ripped to shreds for about 15 minutes, different angles. Wow. And not once prior to that, or after the game, the night of the game, or even after that video meeting, was there not even a conversation, but like hello, or hey, we need more, or like, you understand why I did that? It was just, back on the 5th line or whatever, and away you go. And a lot of it was just like 3 different angles of a clip without any coaching after. It's just like, we can't do this. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. What do we do? Like, what do you want me to do? Because in my head, I was like, I thought I probably did the right thing. I remember it vividly. And I remember leaving there being like, yeah, screw this guy. If you want to embarrass me, fine. But you're not going to coach me either. So what are we doing? And at that point, the end is near. And I eventually got moved in the offseason. But, if you're done with the player, that's fine. But these guys are dedicated athletes. If you get to a certain spot, and I'm not saying, deal with entitlement and let that happen, because you can't. But understand that, anybody that's at the NHL level has put their whole life into this. So they definitely care. So I got moved. I went to New York, and it was a different sort of coaching style from John Tortorella. You get ripped to shreds, but he'll tell you exactly what he needs, and he'll come back to you after, and he'll give it to you more. And you're like, geez, man, this guy's relentless. He won't leave me alone. He hates my guts. But that's not the case. I figured out quickly that if he was leaving me alone, I was probably on my way out. He wanted me to get better. He wanted to mold me into a certain player. And I'm forever grateful for Torts. Incidentally, I also had Mike Sullivan as the assistant, because if I had any more questions, I'd go to him. And he wasn't soft by any means, but he had a softer approach than Torts did, where I could fully get the understanding and grasp what was happening.
Dude, I think I'm a tough person, but I would not be cut out for that. I would have cried and I would have ran away with the whole video stuff. If Nesson had me and they were like, look how bad you are on air, and they just didn't say anything.
Well, they haven't done that. They've done that with me. I don't know what you're talking about, man.
They don't do that
with everybody?
No. And if they do, they're nice about it. But dude, I can't even get into it. We have to throw to break. So you're on for one more segment with us. Guys, we'll be right back after this break. Brian Boyle, Adam Pellerin, Sophia to talk. The new head coach for the Boston Bruins, Marco Sturm, will be back in 2 minutes.
Welcome back to Hockey Hub. Adam Pellerin, Sophia Jurksztowicz. Happy to be joined by Brian Boyle as the Bruins announced their next head coach, Marco Sturm. That announcement made just after 9 o'clock this morning. Brian, I wanted to ask you a question about some guys you played with back in the day, and obviously a number of former players are head coaches now. You know, some of those are transferable skills. We were talking to Andrew Ferentz a week or two ago, and he was just talking about Sturm specifically, and said that, you know, he was always prepared, absolute competitor, tremendous effort, and those are transferable skills, you know, to head coaching. So the question I have for you: are there any teammates that you had back in the day that you knew had what it took to be a head coach in the NHL?
A great question. Not. I never thought of that. I never really.
I stumped them.
Who
yeah.
Could, yeah. Well, I knew a Sean O'Donnell was going to be involved in hockey, and he is. He's with LA still, because of how great he took care of Drew Doughty and even me. I mean, I was a forward, but he took time to help me. Older guys that understood. Even a guy who might be in and out of the lineup was important to the team. And if you could make him feel that importance, because it is important, he's going to play better. Chris Drury was one. He's a GM now, obviously, but he was one that really was good to me when I came in, you know, even though he went to BU, which is just stupid. And, you know, look what he's doing now. He's the GM of his childhood favorite team, and he's got his work cut out for him in retooling sort of what's going on there. But he's obviously so committed, and these guys because it's not easy going out and playing. There's hard days, there's hard moments, but you sort of you understand that, like, this is your life now. So if you don't like how hard it is to trade, or you don't like how hard it is to play when you're a little banged up or hurt and do it well, it's probably not for you. And it gets even harder, I think, in management or in coaching, because you have less control over what happens on the ice, and you get more of the responsibility if it goes poorly. So there are guys that are staying involved. Derek Stepan is one who's trying to stay involved. He loves the game. He thinks about the game. There are other guys. Teddy Purcell is one that, I mean, he knew every player's tape job and what way they shot and their pattern on their stick play. They're guys that just blow your mind with what they know and how much they consume. And those guys typically stay in hockey. And other guys that even are doing what I'm doing now, they're trying to stay in TV. It's because whatever, they might have a younger family. They want to be involved because they love the game so much. It's a part of who they are. But they certainly can't, cut up video for 8 hours a day and be on the road for half the year because of other circumstances, right? So, I mean, Derek Stepan is one that everybody would agree that he's on the right path. He's going to be in management somewhere. He's with Minnesota right now, working under Billy Guerin. Drury was one that makes a lot of sense. Sean O'Donnell as well was really, really good to me.
We're going to transition because we only have about 5 minutes left to the Stanley Cup final. And of course, being a Boston-based show, I want to zero in on Brad Marchand. But really quick, I wanted to tell the story about Marco Sturm. One of my friends is in the league, and I'm not going to say for which team because he said they interviewed him a few years ago. Didn't go, obviously he didn't get the head coaching job, but he said he was a PR guy 2 months in, like a young, fresh kid, 2 months in to his first NHL job many, many years ago. Sturm played for that team for about 2 months, and then I don't know what happened, if it was a trade or whatever, signed in free agency. But he said every year when he runs into him, or if he ever does, even though they had barely any contact, Sturm remembers him, asks him about how he is, spends time talking to him, and he just said, I just want to highlight that. That's the kind of guy Marco Sturm is. So I think that's a nice story for Bruins fans to know what they're getting themselves into. But like I said, Stanley Cup final, we got to zero in on Brad Marchand, and there was an article that came out, Emily Benjamin did it, NHL.com, that talked about playing this year. I don't know if you saw it or heard it, Brian, about playing without a contract, playing this last year, coming in without a contract, and how of a different experience that was for him. And he used the word, you don't like it, but you have to be a little bit more selfish. Can you just expand on that? Like, I didn't think about that much and how that would have changed the perspective and the mentality of a player, especially one like Brad Marchand, and especially one like a captain that's supposed to lead. But how difficult would that be when your team, the team you played with your whole career, doesn't have a contract for you in your final year?
That's hard at the age he's at, too, because if he got injured, and he came off a few injuries this offseason, right? You need to prove yourself all over again. Doesn't matter what you've done in the past. Doesn't matter if you have a Hall of Fame career like Brad Marchand had. You have to prove yourself coming off 3 different surgeries and being 36 or 37 years old. Are you able to play for another 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it may be, that the player probably wants and thinks he deserves? Because, again, he was under market value for most of his career in Boston. And you think that when you're doing the team a favor, you're doing the general manager a favor by taking a lower number. Yeah, the term's longer, so you have that security, but you think you're going to make up for that. Well, as I could tell any player that's listening now, the GM's never going to come back with more the next time because you did him a favor the first time. So that's the biggest lie told in free agency. That's the biggest lie told in re-signing a contract. They have to get you at a certain number. If you're okay with that, you should be. Your team's going to be better for it. But when you go home every night, or when you're looking at your young kids and understanding that there's going to be college to pay for, and if you have daughters, maybe a wedding or whatever it is, there's the cost of living. That's going to adjust some things. Now, if you're a good enough player, it shouldn't matter, because I think Brad Marchand's made quite a bit of money. But again, you put in everything you can to this, and you have a finite amount of time to make money at it. And, I'm thankful I have the TV job, and if you want to go down to coaching, that's fine, but they ain't paying you what an NHL player gets paid. So you got to understand those things. And I do understand the stress of it when, especially if you get past 30, 32 years old, one injury, just a black mark on your resume. And whether you deserve that or not, it doesn't matter, because they look at what history has shown and what Father Time does to players. So if you're looking for term, you're probably not going to get the term you want, and the dollar amount will come down a little bit. So then you're looking at fit. How can you win? It's not easy. There's only so many teams that are looking for certain types of players every year. There's other teams that have a ton of cap space, but if they have a ton of cap space, it's because they probably haven't had success. And if you're 37 years old, you're Brad Marchand, do you want to go to a team that doesn't have a chance of winning? There's a lot that goes into it, and he had to go down that road. Now he's in a good spot and has an opportunity to win a Stanley Cup, a very good one. But you sacrifice some things in that, and if he wants to stay there and loves it, well, there's a lot of guys that played really well. So that number that he might want might not be there because all these other players have to get paid as well. There's so many things that go into it, and being selfish. I think every player has to be selfish to a certain point. You have to wake up every morning, look yourself in the mirror, and do what's best for you to get yourself ready to play, because that's also what's best for the rest of the guys, your line mates, your teammates. There's a certain selfishness to it. My kids and wife took a back seat for a number of different time periods in my life during playoffs, whatever it was. I mean, I left my wife at the hospital the night she gave birth to our firstborn because we had to go play game 3 in the conference finals. And I was just like, hey, you good? I'll be back, some point tomorrow for a little bit, but we're doing this thing right now. And she understood that. So selfishness is in the ultimate team sport, where you do anything for your teammates when the puck is dropped. Selfishness is a big part of the rest of the day. And it's a necessity, really.
Yeah, because you make sacrifices, but at the end of the day, you do have to look out for yourself. Before we let you go, because you're in Edmonton, a hell of a game to kick off the Stanley Cup final last night. Oilers take it 4-3 in overtime. How do you see this series playing out quickly, Brian, before we let you go?
Well, I have Edmonton winning it. I think Edmonton is due now. And I say that because of how it went last year, for one, down 3-0, and they showed me a lot coming back. And how they played the first round against LA, did not start well. They've gone through huge shifts in their team, with Calvin Pickard coming in, winning 6 games, then getting hurt again. Stuart Skinner comes back. I don't know if he plays for Edmonton ever again if Calvin Pickard doesn't get hurt. And he has shown he has climbed that emotional, mental mountain that has brought his talent out and gotten the rest of it out. Last night in particular, right? It's either, 1 or 0 goals against, or 6. And he'd given up 3 to a point. One of them probably should have come back. I didn't agree with the call. But then in the second period, where Florida found their game, he was excellent. And then Edmonton stopped the bleeding with Florida, who can, when they start, they don't stop coming. And they stopped the bleeding and found a way. And Connor, who was quiet all night, makes this little backhand sauce to Matthias Ekholm, who's now healthy and playing well. I think Wallman was good. They're just a deeper team. That being said, if Florida finds a way to come out and win, wouldn't surprise me at all, because that's a machine. That is the standard in the NHL. They will push back. Getting a win at home in the first 2 games was huge for Edmonton.
Yep.
But I don't expect it to be a short series by any means.
Yeah, Florida doesn't get rattled. I think it's going 7. But this year, Game 7 would be in Edmonton. But it's going to be a fun series. Hey, Boyle, you're the man for joining us. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll continue our coverage here on Hockey Hub. Marco Sturm hired as the next Bruins head coach. Billy Jaffe and Andrew Raycroft, Razor, join us on the other side.
welcome back to the Hockey Hub. A lot of insight from Brian Boyle, Sophia Jurksztowicz Adam Pellerin with you on the morning, about an hour and a half ago-ish. The Bruins announced their 30th head coach in Bruins history, that being former Bruin player Marco Sturm. So, Adam, no more guessing, no more predictions, no more wondering who's going to be the best fit. Can't wait for the press conference. I don't think that's been announced yet, but I have so many questions. I'd love to know the process, how many candidates. I don't know if Don Sweeney's going to answer all these questions, but how many candidates he was interviewed and what stood out about Marco Sturm. I changed, by the way, sorry, Billy and Razor will be joining us shortly. We're just waiting to get them on, get their insight on this. I changed my mind a million times about if being a former Bruin mattered at all. And I was on the team, no, that it doesn't matter at all. And I slowly made my way over thinking, especially given where the Bruins are, especially their loss of leadership, that it does. And I think this is a very good call. What were your thoughts on him having Bruins experience, the new head coach? Did that play an impact or not in your decision?
I don't think it was a requirement necessarily, but I don't think it hurts. And
right.
I was on Boston's Enter the Chat when the news was announced right afterwards. And, I made a cross-sport analogy. I don't love doing that, but I did make a cross-sport analogy to the Red Sox and Alex Cora. Alex Cora played for the Red Sox, won a World Series in Boston, understood what it meant to play in Boston, and also had no managerial experience either. Boston was his first, job, and still is his only job as a manager in Major League Baseball. So the moral of that story is, he knew how to handle the media in Boston. He knows what the Red Sox mean to Boston, and also didn't have managerial experience and was still able to win in Boston. So again, don't love the cross-sport analogies, but I did think of that when Marco Sturm was announced.
I think that's a great analogy, Adam. Boston is a unique place to play, to coach, to whatever. On that note, and to broadcast. So on that note, let's bring in a couple of broadcasters that we know very well. That being Billy Jaffe and Andrew Raycroft. What's up, guys?
Morning.
Good morning.
Look at these guys. Wow.
Where
guys
are
good?
you? Billy, where are you first, Billy? Are you in Edmonton?
I am.
Okay.
I'm in the beautiful, luxurious hotel room drinking hotel coffee, joining you guys right now.
Yeah.
If
All
we're able
right.
to drink
You're
coffee,
looking thrilled too, by the way. There we go. There's some smiles. Excellent.
You have to have coffee first thing in the morning, But.
Same. There you go. Cheers.
Man.
Cheers, guys. Guys, I don't know where to start. Billy, I'll start with you. We'll go in the order like we do on our pregame show, to the right of me on the desk. So, Billy, your thoughts on Marco Sturm? Adam and I were just chatting about, did Bruins experience matter? And like he said, it wasn't a requirement. The more I thought about it, I didn't think it did. The more I thought about it and where the Bruins are at, the more I think it's a nice touch and maybe not the most important thing, but a factor nevertheless. What are your thoughts on this hiring?
Well, I don't think it was mandatory. I mean, if the amount of people that Don Sweeney and management looked at, so were obviously not all connected to the Bruins. And I think that he absolutely would have considered all of these guys. I mean, Jim Montgomery wasn't a Bruin. He's a coach. So did it help? It couldn't hurt. There's no question in my eyes. Was it the ultimate factor? No, I think a lot of other things like communication, style, structure, ability to get most out of players, a lot of those other coach things factored in most. But then when all's said and done, it's a nice bonus to have played, 302 games, I think, for the Bruins. So I think that helped, but it didn't make it have to absolutely be that.
And Razor, just as a former player, getting a former player as a head coach, how much does that matter?
Yeah, well, that's where I was going to go. I think they were. I get the sense they were looking for a guy who played in the league. I think we're seeing throughout the league there's an uptick of guys that are kind of around my age or guys that I played with that are entering the league, whether it's general managers or coaches. I think that's the aspect that mattered. To get a Bruins really tough. I guess the only one probably since Jerry Cheevers was Mike Sullivan that had a cup of coffee with the Bruins. But of course, you just rattled off the names. It's tough to get a Bruin guy, but I think at this point, it was important to get a guy that played in the league, and then you add into the fact he won a silver medal in the Olympics. He was an assistant coach in the NHL. He was head coach in the AHL. He's got the chops, and he's put the time in. He's put the effort in. He's put the work in. He's rode the buses, and he's a good fit. And of course, the added relationship that he has with not just Don Sweeney, not just with the organization, but with guys that are around the team like Zdeno Chara and Patrice Bergeron and Tuukka Rask and these guys. It all seems to fit well.
We had Brian Boyle on before you guys, and we were just talking about what coaches stood out to him in a good and bad ways, and he pointed out in bad ways and we've heard many stories from players, coaches that just like give you the cold shoulder. He gave a story of like watching video with the coach where he just basically kept a video on loop of him making mistakes but didn't say a thing, then kind of benched him, and how he kind of just lost his trust. Boyle lost the desire to play for a guy like that. It's unbelievable how many stories you hear about that kind of coaching style, but it is trending in a different direction, and we've heard Jim Montgomery talk about this. Communication, sitting down with guys. He said many times, Montgomery said, they'll know what they do right and they'll know what they do wrong, and that's something that I'm hearing from other people who've played for him or people who've worked with him, that Marco Sturm's communication is on point, and that's something that he stresses in interviews. How important is that, guys, for a team that's retooling, so to speak? Billy, you take this one.
Oh, it's huge. Somebody that worked with him, told me that he's firm but fair. He's direct in his approach. He's always been a nice guy. I don't know him except from talked to a few times as a broadcaster, in the sense of I don't have a personal relationship with him, but always very amenable and incredibly agreeable. And, the old school way, and I'm not going back to the 80s way, but just maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago, doing certain things, you're seeing that change as the players' personalities change. More young players come in the league. It's not, you're not talking down to them, you're talking with them. And we've talked about that before, both here, and Razor and I have talked about it on Morning Brew, et cetera, all that stuff. It is definitely a different way getting through to the younger players. But it's also just how the world has changed, and then people get treated differently. So it's incredibly important how you communicate. You got to get your message through. Coaches in the NHL now, Adam, and so they're lucky if they last 3 to 4 years. I mean, 4 years is like eons, right? I mean, so You've got a short-term window to try and be the outlier to make a difference. And if you can't communicate from day one with the guys, your window gets smaller and shorter and shorter. So you've got to get your message through. You've got to have a clear message, and you don't have to kowtow by any stretch to them. Players, I don't think they want that. If they don't want the inmates running the asylum, but you absolutely have got to get through to them to where they believe that, okay, you get why you're saying this, not just do this. This is why we do this. And again, I hear that his ability is to do that is good.
Razor, the question I have for you, again, there's going to be a lot of talk about the fact that Marco Sturm doesn't have any experience as an NHL head coach. So with that said, how important is the coaching staff, the assistant coaches, to have that experience so he can sort of lean on them for some guidance?
Certainly extremely important, and that will be the next ball that drops. Does he, who's hiring that staff? Who is anyone staying here from the previous staff, and where they go with that? I think Sturmy, like Billy was just saying, he has amazing relationships throughout the game. He's one of the nicest teammates that I've ever played with. He's a guy that stands out as a teammate in his positivity and his smile and his happiness and his love for the game. So again, he's got so many relationships through this game. He understands that as being a first-time head coach, he will need to have some experience around him, guys that have been around, and guys that he can really lean on when the things get tough. So I have no question about his relationship abilities and his ability to hire a great staff, but it's certainly going to be very important.
Razor, follow-up to that, you had Mike Sullivan in Boston. He was a first-time NHL coach. You've had coaches with NHL experience. Does it take longer for a guy that doesn't have the NHL head coaching experience to earn the respect of players, or does that even matter once you're in it?
No, well, it certainly helps if you have a Stanley Cup, right, to come in and have the hammer. So I think you have to just come in and tread a little bit differently. Like we were just talking about, though, that's kind of the way the world works now. Again, when I played, if the coach didn't talk to you all season, that was probably a good thing, and that's far from the truth now. So, again, this is kind of lends itself back to the first answer and why I think it was important to have a player. If you're a first-time coach, but you're a player, you have respect and credibility right away because you've gone through this league. You know exactly what it takes to be in this league. You've never been on the outside. You know the travel. You know the hotels. You know the dressing room. So I think if you're a first-time head coach, you've never played, then it's a completely different thing. I think you're more on the same level. If you played in the league, being a first-time head coach is similar to being a second-time head coach somewhere else.
Billy, I have a technical question for you in terms of like what's next for Marco Sturm. Don't know if you can answer it, but we were just talking about his staff and you know how much say he's going to have in hiring that. So I wanted to ask you, how much say does he have when it comes to assistants and the staff? And then how much say will he have, if any, in the upcoming draft? Like, is this all Don Sweeney? Is he going to be talking to his head coach about what he thinks he might need or not?
But the draft, let's start with that one, the draft portion of it. That's management and scouts. That's their job. And, Marco's coming in. What's today's date? I'm looking on here.
The 5th, I think.
June 5th, right? So the draft is June 20-something, 27th, I think, 28th. And, Marco's specialty is coaching young players or coaching with, players, not drafting them. And so if I think that's all going to be on all the amateur scouting and general manager to make those decisions. Maybe in the future, as the relationship develops more and there's input of but also let's not forget these players most likely aren't playing in the NHL this year, right? Now, free agency, that's different. That's something that he can have absolute input on and discussions with and will with Don Sweeney and management. With regard to taking his staff or making his staff, he'll have some say. I don't know. That's part of negotiations oftentimes with coaches. Do they have carte blanche? Do they say, well, we would like to keep this guy as from the staff because we'd like this and this, and maybe that's part of then there's discussions, about that. You can take the other two, or this is what we think, but that's usually part of the negotiation process of what is going to be required and allowed, and my guess is he'll have some say. I guess you'll see one or two new guys and one or two guys stay. That's so far I think he'll be at.
Well, we do have, it's all but official. It's not official yet, but we have heard that Joe Sacco will be joining Mike Sullivan in New York. Not sure if you guys have heard those reports. Elliot Friedman, I've already said this on the show, one of my favorite sources. And he says, and there is word on Twitter that Dave Quinn and Joe Sacco are in the process of joining Mike Sullivan's staff in Manhattan. So that was also one of the other questions we had, like what's going to happen to Joe Sacco? What are your thoughts, guys, or who wants to take this?
Well, real quick, Razor, are they going to change the colors of the Rangers, red, white, and blue to white and red? Red and white for
the BU guys.
They're going to be...
They stick together, boy. They stick together. Between San Jose and the Rangers, it's just BU.
That could be a hell of a 3-on-3 coach against player 3-on-3 post practice skate. Those three guys out there just need to get a goalie of some kind. I'm sure there's a BU goalie out there they can find. Razor, I'll let you take it. Doesn't surprise me at all that Joe Sacco, also Razor, was linked to Toronto. As soon as it became clear that he was not a finalist, he became a very valuable commodity and option for teams looking for a high-level guy to round out their staff. So congrats to him and Quinny and both of them.
Yeah, best assistant coach in the league, right? Or associate coach, or however you'd want to say it. That's what Joe is, and he's very, very good at it. And we saw it here for a long time in Boston, and Sully and the Rangers are better for it.
Razor, first order of business for Marco Sturm. By the way, I should tell you that the Bruins have just announced that there will be a press conference on Tuesday at 11 a.m. where they will introduce Marco Sturm, and Don Sweeney will be available as well. So that news just coming out a short time ago. First order of business for Marco Sturm, Razor, from a player's perspective.
Well, yeah, he's got to get through that press conference. So that'll, that's a start. How that goes. It'll just be about reaching out right now. It'll be reaching out. It'll be getting into Boston. He'll be around for development camp at the start, which again has no bearing on the players that are going to be here next season, but that's work for him. But again, the main thing is developing a quick relationship with everybody over phone. He's probably going to travel around. I'm sure he meets with the core guys in person at some point throughout the summer. So he goes on tour a little bit and gets an idea of where those players at. He gets their input onto what makes this team better, what makes the organization better, and then prepares himself and the team for training camp in September.
You guys are joining us on our show, but you're also doing a morning brew. I miss reading those very, very long, convoluted promos that we used to write on pre and post game, where I would always screw them up. So instead of reading a promo, why don't you guys just talk about morning brew and what you've got going on the show today? I'm assuming you'll be touching this news.
We're coming out of hibernation because we've both been on the go doing stuff. I'm making Razor suffer about 40 minutes with me later today, although I do know deep down inside he misses it.
I do.
We're gonna percolate a little coffee and talk about. Now we're gonna talk this. It's something that we said our last show, which we did a couple of weeks ago. And when the Bruins were ready to name a new coach, we would have another show, another episode, and we will. And we have to decide what time we're going to record that at, but we'll let everybody know. And I don't know, Razor, you playing, what, you got golf today, or you got coaching or something?
I played 27 yesterday, so
nice.
I'm taking today off, and then so just hanging out, getting organized.
Wow, summer of Razor, going out there and playing 27, no big deal, huh?
Got hot too, got real hot.
Yeah,
guys,
pretty soon it's going to be the summer of stubble, not Razor, because he's not going to use the Razor.
That's good.
Nice, very well done. Mid-season form right there.
I would rather do 20 piles of laundry than play 27 holes of golf. Like, I'll do 9 and I'm good. I don't know how you guys do it. It's the weirdest thing in the world. Weirdest thing.
He likes 12. He likes 12, and then that's it.
All right. Sorry, we're jumping all over each other. But guys, thanks for joining us. Love your insight. Billy, I appreciate the insight about, kind of what happens at the draft and the players and all that, the staff. Enjoy your pod today. Adam and I are sending it to break, and we're going to wrap up the show together at the other side. Guys, thanks for being on. We'll be right back after this. welcome back to the Hockey Hub. Sophia and Adam Pellerin with you. We had a slew of guests today talking about the breaking news just a couple of hours ago. Marco Sturm, the 30th head coach in Bruins history. Adam, we've been asking others about their thoughts. We've got about 2 minutes. What are your thoughts on this? And we like you mentioned, the press conference Tuesday at 11. I don't know if I'll be going or hosting, or you'll be going or hosting, but either way, I'm going to text you some questions if you end up going, because I have a lot of questions for Don about this process. But yeah, like your initial reaction to this, and we finally know kind of the face and the direction of the Bruins going forward.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting hire, and it's the first domino to fall this offseason for the Bruins, which will be an interesting one. Obviously, with a high draft pick, number 7 selection, you're retooling, not rebuilding. You still have foundational pieces in place, and so it'll be interesting to see how the Bruins add on to that, complement the David Pasternaks, the Charlie McAvoys, and so on. So it's the first domino to fall. I think what's going to be interesting next is what the coaching staff looks like. We have the reports that Joe Sacco is going to New York with the Rangers. Jay Leach reportedly interviewed for the head coaching position. Will he be a part of the staff moving forward? So all sorts of questions to be answered. But in terms of the hire itself, I think it's exciting because you don't know what to expect. You've never seen Marco Sturm on an NHL bench in a head coaching capacity. He was an assistant in L.A. So, yeah, I think, obviously a familiar face in Boston. So, yeah, let's see how things play out. Should be fun.
Yeah, and then obviously free agency is going to answer a lot of questions too about how much of a retool we're getting, or are we, pushing a little quicker to more playoff appearances. But we'll have a lot of our questions answered. Like I said, Tuesday, Wednesday we'll have another episode. We'll see you guys next week on the Hockey Hub. Thanks for joining us this time.